Hey guys, Tom Barclay here. A bit of a late one, but I thought I'd do an update because big news and not great news from Tottenham's perspective, and it involves Eberechi Eze. Sadly, it looks like he is probably going to go to Arsenal at this point after a few days where it very much looked like he was probably going to come to Tottenham. Let's put some context to this. So, from Tottenham's perspective, they've wanted a new number 10. They obviously went for Morgan Gibbs-White early in the summer, thought they had him, but they didn't after Forest became very, very agitated and angry over this alleged secret 60 million buyout clause, which Spurs thought they triggered. It ended up with Morgan Gibbs-White signing a new contract at Forest, so that one was dead in the water. Subsequently, James Maddison injured his anterior cruciate ligament in his, I think, right knee, if I remember correctly, in that sunny final match in Seoul against Newcastle. They were already looking for another number 10 anyway, but obviously him being injured for what is likely going to be most of the season obviously only increased and intensified that need for a new number 10 in Thomas Frank's team. They looked like they'd gone for Eberechi Eze or landed upon him, and it looked like it was going to happen. At the weekend, there was some interesting sort of developments. So I remember going to Spurs game on Saturday against Burnley for the season opener, and the word I got at that point was that Eze was expecting himself as the player, expecting not to be involved against Chelsea for in Sunday's Premier League, their own Premier League curtain raiser against Chelsea on the Sunday, because a move to Tottenham was close. That didn't happen. The move was close, but it wasn't close enough to prevent him from playing and featuring against Chelsea. He obviously played very well, unlucky to have a brilliant free kick ruled out, maybe rightly so by the rules, doesn't matter now anyway. He featured and played well against Chelsea. But then from then, it still felt like it was going to happen with Spurs. It was just a matter of time. There was face-to-face talk, or there were direct talks between Daniel Levy and Steve Parish, the two respective chairmen of the two clubs, Tottenham and Crystal Palace. That continued for a few days, and it felt like there was just a bit of a sticking point towards the end, so far as I'm led to believe, over conditions of payments. But they were basically there, and then things changed because Arsenal, who have showed an interest or had showed an interest in Eze throughout the summer, but whose interest had generally gone a bit quieter and allowed Spurs to sort of make a move recently because they saw Eze mainly as a number 10, so I was led to believe. And after they'd re-signed Ethan Nwaneri to a new contract, they felt like they had, with him and Odegaard, that position particularly filled. Maybe it was all sort of bluff and bluster, I don't know. But what seems to be the big change, which would fit with that whole timeline and that whole reasoning, is that Kai Havertz has picked up an injury in the last few days. He came on as a sub for Arsenal against Manchester United at the weekend in their own season opener, which they won 1-0, played about half an hour in that game. Didn't appear to be injured. It's not clear at this point when or how he got injured, whether it was in training or what, in the subsequent days after, but it's an injury that, whilst they're not sure of the severity, and they're still doing tests at the moment to find out how bad it is, it's clearly enough that they feel like they need to go and get another attacker in, because I guess the worry would be that if it turns out to be a bad injury and they don't replace him, even though they're not really like-for-like players, but I guess they can both play in that attacking midfield role, then they would be leaving themselves short. Eze, as I sort of said, if you go back to a video I did months ago, at the start of the window, I'd said that I believed that he was keen to come to Spurs, but he was also keen to go to other clubs, and he may have even stayed at Palace. He wasn't against that. And to be fair to Eze, unlike Alexander Isak at Newcastle and Johan Wisse at Brentford, he hasn't down tools, or he hasn't become kicked up a fuss, probably a better way of putting it. He hasn't made himself unavailable like he didn't against Chelsea, even though, as I said, it was expected from people close to him that he wasn't going to play in that game, and he obviously did. That he has continued to be very professional towards Palace. He played in that game. He also trained today being Wednesday, ahead of their European game against Fredrikstad. It's a Europa Conference League playoff first leg against Fredrikstad tomorrow at Selhurst Park. That in itself's full of controversy of them being in that competition despite winning the FA Cup and being demoted, and that's a whole different story. But he trained with him, and basically it was understood that Palace wanted him to play, or expect him to play, or are keen for him to play in that game on Thursday. But Arsenal, after the sort of Havertz situation, have made their move, and I think it was always, if Arsenal were, if it was a choice between the two of them, which effectively is what this has come down to, I think it was always more likely that Eze was going to pick Arsenal. He used to follow them as a boy. He was actually at the club as a youngster in the academy, albeit got released. And to be honest, as much as Spurs fans won't want to hear it, when you look at where Arsenal are in the pecking order, even though obviously Tottenham have won a trophy more recently with that unforgettable Europa League, Arsenal have come second in the last 3 seasons. Obviously Spurs finished 17th last year. They're regulars in the Champions League. Yes, pressure is on Arteta to deliver something this season, but they are making general progress to be contenders or challengers at least on a regular basis. And they've obviously invested heavily in the likes of Zubamedi and Gyökeres and other players as well, Noni Madueke. So I think it was always likely, if it came down to a decision between the two clubs, he was probably going to pick Arsenal. And that, at this point, is what is expected to happen. For a bit of context when it comes to Spurs, just a few notes. So it must be so frustrating from, obviously, fans' point of view, but from Tottenham's as well, because it appeared that on today being Wednesday, Spurs had finally got to an agreement over, at least Spurs sources are saying, they finally got to an agreement with Palace over the terms of the transfer, because that's, I was saying about payments and the conditions of it, that seemed to be the sticking point. They seemed to like they'd finally got to an agreement on that and had agreed terms with the player. I don't think that was ever going to be that much of an issue. As I said, was interested in moving to Tottenham, and he was very keen and committed to coming to Spurs. Like I said, at the weekend, I think he thought the move was happening, hence why he was expecting not to play against Chelsea. Didn't down tools, obviously, but that was what he was expecting, or at least that's what I'm led to believe. But Palace didn't want to finalise the deal because they wanted him to feature against Fredrikstad on Thursday. He wasn't going to kick up a fuss because of the way he's been acting very professionally and has a lot of passion and love for Crystal Palace. I mean, let's be honest, as much as he's perhaps outgrown them with the way he's developed, they have been the club that they were the ones who took a chance on him from QPR. Take a chance on him sounds a little bit disrespectful, but other clubs didn't, and that's where he's really gone on to become this fantastic player who's now in the reckoning to start for England, albeit I guess that's a different conversation with the talent they've got at their disposal, albeit Spurs fans, if he does go to Arsenal, won't want to hear about it. And then basically Arsenal came into this late this afternoon, and they've agreed to the same terms, basically, or similar terms as what Palace had agreed with Spurs, and he's just basically decided that he wants to go to Arsenal, because he's, like I say, he's always got close ties to them. He was at the club when he was younger. He was basically a supporter of the club when he was younger. So that's just the way it's played out, and it does feel like Tottenham did do enough to get their man in terms of sealing a deal. But fans will obviously come at it from a different point of view and think, why couldn't it just have been done quicker before Arsenal had a chance? Because I guess at the weekend, if Havertz has picked up this injury in training or wherever, and subsequently, and that is the catalyst to reigniting Arsenal's proper interest, then that didn't seem to be the case at the weekend. So I suppose could have got a deal done then. Then they could have had him. I don't know, maybe that's being naive, maybe that's not how it quite works, but I can understand why Spurs fans might feel that way, and I guess the club can expect that kind of pushback from the supporters on that front. Very frustrating and a real shame because, as I said in one of my recent episodes of the Tottenham Way with George Sessions, our new fellow Tottenham Way podcaster, just felt he was perfect for Tottenham. Just really fit in. Like he's that kind of player who can really get fans off their seats as that sort of X factor, a bit like what we've seen with Kudus, but I think to another level. England international, his motivation, his hunger is perfect at this stage of his career. It's not like he's been doing it at the top level for a long time. He's worked his way to this point where you feel like he was really going to kick on. He can play in multiple positions. He would fit that number 10 role, but he could also play left wing if needed be, particularly with the likes of Tell and Odebear looking a bit raw still. He would have been great. And for a pretty good fee, just would have been perfect. But it looks like Arsenal got him. It's an interesting one with him going to Arsenal, though, because if they don't see him as much of a left winger, then they still presumably see Odegaard and Nwaneri as those key number 10 positions. So he's going into a big squad. I mean, they've got a lot of games, obviously, but you do wonder whether, from his own point of view, particularly with the World Cup coming up, whether Tottenham would have been the more secure choice for regular game time. He would have played every week. Arsenal remains to be seen if he will. Be an interesting one. But yeah, frustrating from Tottenham fans' point of view. And where this leaves their search for number 10, well, I guess I'm going to have to try and find out what happens from here. I mean, just one note, there was a bit of talk about even Spurs putting in an offer for Richarlison as part of the deal. I'm led to believe I don't think that's the case, as far as I'm aware. I do think, and Richarlison's an interesting one, isn't it? I think of the last few windows, if they had an acceptable offer, they definitely would have taken it. It's different now to a certain extent, you could argue, because he obviously scored twice at the weekend, looked really, really good. But do you really make decisions over one game? Well, the Spurs certainly didn't when it came to Ange Postecoglou's future. So who's to say that if they didn't get an offer that tempted them, they wouldn't change their minds. But speaking to sources particularly close to the player, be surprised if he moves between now and the end of the window. And I'm not sure there was anything really in that Crystal Palace situation. But hey, look, that's as far as I'm aware. So yeah, I guess we'll have to wait to see what happens next with their pursuit for another number 10. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Fingers crossed you heard this video. I've had some weird feedback from you guys. Some saying the sound is bad. I don't know if it's me being quite softly spoken. I listen to them back and I think they're fine. And I get other people saying they're totally fine. I don't quite understand what the issue is. But if it's a persistent problem, I'm going to have to sort it out. I am getting a new phone soon, so maybe that will be different on the new device. Fingers crossed, because I know it's frustrating. But anyway, nowhere near as frustrating, obviously, as this situation with Eze. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Cheers.